Hey guys, today we're going to be breaking down the Living Legend format and the results from Battle Hardened Singapore, and then I'm going to be breaking down my Briar deck for the upcoming ProQuest season. So first of all, what is Living Legend? Living Legend is the format where decks go after they have rotated out of Classic Constructed. The reason that a lot of you might be interested in learning about Living Legend is the upcoming ProQuest season, in which Living Legend for the first time will be a format eligible for events near you to qualify for Pro Tour Yokohama. So obviously we're in a pretty new format. For those who don't know much about the format's history, originally the first Living Legend event was won by Lucas Oswald in Battle Hardened Barcelona at Worlds 2023. Notably, this top 8 had 8 copies of Stavo in the top 8, which says a lot about that deck and kind of where it used to sit historically. Since then, we've had a few different dominant decks rotate through the meta. We had a meta where Verdance was insane because of Kraken's Ether Vein, which was later banned, and then we most recently had a format where Chain was kind of very, very insane because of the printing of Cull as well as several other tools in the RuneGate vein and kind of the consistency that brought you. Um, so now, currently, post restriction of several key cards, we've got a really wide open and interesting format kind of going into this ProQuest season. One that should be kind of be a lot of fun for players to kind of explore and make their mark on. And I will say the format is in one of the best places for any format I've seen in Fab right now. And I think there's a lot of complexity, a lot of skill expression in deck building and in the games. And I think it's a really exciting time to be getting into this format, and I would highly encourage people to give it a go. So, breaking down the results from Battle Hardened Singapore. So, first of all, Naib Mercer came first with Ira, Scarlet Revenger. Um, this is obviously a bit of an interesting pick, but if you break down the rest of the top 8, maybe this will make a bit more sense. We had 2 copies of Briar Warden of Forms, David Lee, who came second, and uh, G. Tim Lee, playing Briar Warden of Forms, who came 5th to 8th. Outside of that, we also had a new player, Gordon Ko, and then we had Chuheng on Icelander, Zen, a Dio, and a Dromai. Notably, 2 of our players made top 8 of this Battle Hunt. We had Drew Cornett on Dromai and Thomas Bailey Galbraith on Dash.io. We will have videos coming out from both of those, kind of explaining and breaking down their deck list and kind of their thoughts about the format going forward and what they would do with their deck lists. Let's break down LL from a kind of wider perspective. So you kind of start off, and everyone assumes, oh, the aggro decks must be all insane because of cards like Art of War, etc. I will say that there is about 4 key archetypes within LL. You have board control decks. These are things like your prisms, your dromais, your enigmas, and your gravy bones. You have disruptive decks. These also sort of fatigue decks also sort of fall into this category. Um, Disruptive decks kind of aim to get above rate by disrupting what their opponent does, and particularly trying to get above rate by exploiting the fact that the aggro decks might not block as well and might be less resilient to damage. Or they might go the vein of trying to fatigue them. Fatigue strategies in this kind of vein include Oldhim, arguably Stavo in some depictions and kind of the way that that deck can be built. And then New and Icelander also kind of fit into that disruption vein where they're trying to get above rate by stopping what their opponent's doing. We then have aggro decks. Aggro decks are really complicated and something we'll touch on later. But a lot of these, Briar, Dash.io, some versions of Aurora, um, any Runeblade really you can think of, like anything like that. And then we have combo decks, which kind of fit into a subsection of the aggro spectrum. These can be things like Kano, Acilio, um, anything that's trying to get like some insane spike damage turn. These decks will typically be not super resilient to disruption, but they'll be incredibly powerful and be doing some of the most broken things in the game when they do get to do their thing. So let's touch on aggro decks and kind of how they fit into the format. Aggro decks are the premier decks of the format. Um, it is you know, aggro is good. Like that's always been the case in Fab. That always will be the case in Fab. There's a really interesting thing with LL where the deck you pick falls on a scale between being a resilient deck and being a powerful deck. Now, I think the really interesting part of Living Legend is that it kind of has the breadth and expanse to kind of show you what those decks are. So decks that are resilient are much more powerful into the decks like Icelander and New, and are much better at beating out the disruption that's trying to target them. But they are inherently less powerful than the decks at the powerful end of the spectrum. These are your decks like Dash.io in the combo vein there, decks like Zen with some of the Stubby Hammers builds, some of the really insane combo fi builds, decks like that. So you have this sliding scale of decks, of aggressive decks, and you can kind of pick where you want to be along that axis as an aggro player. I will say Ira arguably falls either under disruption decks, or you could also argue that it's just the very top end of resilient decks in this format. And I think that's a really interesting kind of blurring of the archetypes by LSS between different heroes. So breaking down the results of this matter, so first of all, we can see that Dash.io, aggro deck. Powerful aggro deck, because Dash.io doesn't block super well, can be disrupted, but it generates an insane amount of value when it does kind of combo off, and when it does get to do the system reset combo, and that is one of the most powerful things in the game to be doing. Dromite, Ash Artist, board control deck. You know, you're trying to play dragons out, those are your things that sit on the board and generate value for you recursively, unless your opponent can deal with them. Briar, Warden of Forms. This is arguably the second most resilient aggro deck in the game right now. And I think there's a very strong contention that it's also just the best aggro deck right now. But we'll touch on that later when I break down my list. Then we have Zen, Tamer of Purpose. This is kind of on the medium spectrum to more powerful end of the aggro deck. So Zen is, you know, obviously you're playing 9 chi. You have equipment you only want to use in specific spots. It's a lot less resilient to disruption, and particularly some versions of fatigue, but it's also extremely powerful when it does get to do its thing. It gets access to Art of War Striders, not Striders, Strides, but you get to employ a lot of powerful combos. Icelander, disruptive decks. You're trying to give your opponent Frostbite in specific spots that makes their turns extremely hard to execute, and then means you can get back above rate with your own value and attack. And when you go into the long game, you have a powerful pivot sideboard plan into the Frost Hex plan. Gordon Co, he's playing New, Alluring Desire. I've looked at his list already a little bit. He's playing Drone of Brutality. You know, he's trying to fatigue his opponent, but also stun them with annoying to deal with disruptive effects like Bonds of Agni, etc. David's playing Briar, we've already talked about that, and now he's playing Ira. So as you can see, we've got a pretty wide spread here, and I will say this is very representative of where I think the format is right now. We've got a high selection of aggro decks that are really well performing. We have a couple of disruptive decks that are doing very well to kind of stop those decks, and then we have one or two board control decks that are aiming to kind of find a middle ground in between these things. And I will say it, you will notice that Ira and Briar being at the top is no mistake, particularly because, you know, they've gone to their semifinals against these disruptive decks, and they've managed to win them out. And I think that's really the strength of the disruptive decks, and kind of their path to coming first at these events, and your path to coming first at your local ProQuest. So I'm going to break down each of the decks individually. So looking at David Lee's Briar deck, so why play Briar? You get access to Rosetta Thorn, which is arguably the best weapon in the game. You get access to Face Purgatory, which is one of the best defensive tools in the game. You make really good use of Tunic. You have a really good AB suite that's like very, very powerful into a lot of decks. Briar himself has one of the best hero abilities in the game. You know, the ability to generate embodiments, to generate block fours in your hand is incredibly powerful, and the tempo swing you can gain from that of playing like 2-card attack hands into blocking 2 cards, you know, you can get very high value turns very, very efficiently and very real. I will say this deck has improved a lot recently due to upgrades in Rosetta. So other reasons to play Briar, you get access to Channel Mount Heroic. This is, but also the action points from the Lightning side to actually take advantage of this. The other very big reason why Briar is really good lately is the card Nimby. This deck, obviously, when you can give it go again from Briar's ability so quickly, is extremely powerful. Another card that this card's very, very powerful with is Skyward Serenade from the Aurora Armory deck. This is a 2-card combo where you play the Skyward Serenade, you tutor a Skizzik that you can play this turn, you make an embodiment, you swing with the Nimby for 3, tutor for a Nimblism, you play the Nimblism, make another embodiment from Briar's hero ability, and then swing with the Skizzik. So that cycle generates 3 value from the Nimby, 3 value from the Nimblism, and 4 value from the Skizzik, all with go again. So that's functionally a 2-card 10 with go again, and then you also can then just tunic afterwards for a Zetaphon, which you have triggered. 2-card 14, very, very powerful. You get access to a lot of the best go again effects in the game to enable your channel mount heroic, like Ravenous Rabble, Scar for a Scar, etc. You get access to Snatch, one of the most powerful cards ever printed in my opinion. Swarming Gloomveil is a bit of a house in this game, in this deck, because of the fact that when you hit with it, you make an embodiment of Earth off Briar. So this is always kind of threatening 0 for 3 go again. If you do anything else, like activating Grass, playing a channel mount heroic, making an embodiment of lightning earlier in the turn, this becomes a 0 for 4 go again. That also blocks 3. That's exactly where you want to be. You get access to a lot of really strong go again cards. Burn Up Shock is a very good card. Nimblim, as we already talked about. Plunder Run, card that was banned in CC for a good reason. This card's very, very strong. And yeah, you get access to a lot of really good tools. And you now have very good Earth Blues to kind of support it. I will say Regrowth Shock is a card exclusive to this format at the moment, and it is extremely powerful. I would highly recommend trying to play with this card a little bit in this format. It's very, very good. And it's also an Earth card for your Channel Mount Heroic. Alright, moving on to Naib's deck. So Naib's deck is kind of based around Zephyr Needle. This card was recently banned in CC during Hunted because of the interactions that they printed during the Hunted with cards like Blood Splatter Vest, Inflict Knives, and Mask of Momentum. These cards are these needles are extremely above rate, and when you play them in Ira, who wants to be generating multiple chain links and kind of getting above value that way, and then you combine it with ways to get them back just in case your opponents do pop them, they become extremely powerful. We saw this deck be tested for like a week before calling Memphis, and it was extremely powerful. Other than that, this is just kind of an Ira deck. You are playing Belittle. Belittle Minnowism is like inherently one of the most powerful kind of combos in the game. I think this list might be wrong. There's no minimum. There we go. 2 blue Minnowism. And I can't see any red. So he's just using it to get extra copies of blues out of his deck, so that he can then play out more of his aggressive threats, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, this card's very, very powerful. It's kind of like a Saltwater Sweller generic is a very good way of explaining it for kind of newer players. This deck's also very resilient. You've got a lot of really good blocking cards. It's got access to a lot of powerful on-hits. You're kind of just trying to grind your opponent down and outvalue them through Ira's hero ability plus the efficiency of Zephyr Needles. Notably, if you swing a needle and then swing another needle, the second one comes in for 3, that one's harder to pop. We look at Golden Co's list. It's a pretty standard new list. Deck hasn't been gone for too long. You can see he's playing Count Your Blessings. Now, notably, this deck is trying to be disruptive as well as gaining life to cover up when it can't stop damage through. This makes a lot of sense. It's playing Drone of Brutality so that you can get into some really late fatigue games. I'm not entirely sure that's necessary on this deck, but maybe it is for certain matchups. Yeah, we got 9 copies of Count Your Blessings. I mean, who doesn't love that card, guys? I mean, that's not a controversial take. And yeah, you're just trying to disrupt your opponent through powerful cards like Bonds of Agony, Mask of Recurring Nightmares, and Leave No Witnesses, Codex. All kind of the effects that you would expect, and then making it hard to block with stuff like Venomous Bite, Siren's Call, etc. Chuheng, so we look at his Icelander list, makes a lot of sense. You now get access to Burn Bearer as a way to extend damage and kind of get through that unblockable damage at the end with Waning Moon and Stormstriders. Very cool to see kind of brought in, probably makes your Prism matchup quite a lot better. If Ice Vein, you've got all these attacks, you're just kind of trying to send these things, so it makes your opponent have smaller hands to disrupt you, or you're just getting true damage through. You get access to a lot of really powerful cards like Hypothermia, which was recently unrestricted. Um, and yeah, this deck's trying to play cards like Channel Lake Frigid, Channel Oblique Expanse to shut down some of the more powerful things going on in this format. And then where's the Frost Hexes? And then against long games, you can set up a big Frost Hex combo to kill your opponent. And notably, it's playing a lot of blues that you kind of want to play so that you can just give your opponent frostbites during their turn, and kind of make it very difficult for them to play their game plan out. We look at Thomas Zimmer's Zen list. Again, we see the Needles coming back. Needles quite powerful. Yeah, this is fairly standard of what you would imagine out of his Zen list. He's playing up sticks and run kind of as a way to stop and recur his Needles against matchups where they might pop them. You got standard combo attacks like Tiger Swipe, Mauling Chi, etc. Chase the Tail. You got your one copy of Bonds of Ancestry. I'm curious what that's for. Oh, so he's playing 3 blue Descendant Gust Wave, so he could play a Descendant Gust Wave, play a Chi card, Transcend, then go tutor off Zen's hero ability to go find Bonds of Ancestry to get some insane value out of this card. Blanches, I presume those are for matchups like Mirrors, etc., as well as I presume Unmovables are for matchups like Oldhim and Stavo. And then we see cards like Art of War, Maul, Salt the Wound. You see these payoffs with playing really big, wide turns that can do some really insane things by getting extra cards from Strider Reprisal, Traverse the Universe, and Art of War. And then look at G's Briar list. Yeah, this all kind of makes sense. We see Arcane Seeds. This card's particularly good if it's a block 4 because of Briar's ability. We see Blossoming Spellblade, I believe, as anti-fatigue tech. Yeah, and this all just kind of makes sense. It's all very similar. Then we see Jude's Dromai list. You see it's becoming royal to gain access to Tomb of Imperial Flame, I believe. Pretty standard equipment. You see Remembrance as an anti-fatigue tool. You see your one copy of Warmonger's Diplomacy. You're only allowed one in this format. That can be particularly good into decks like Dio, etc. But you always do really have to consider if it's actually good in your deck. There's a lot of decks like Briar, etc., where you don't want to be playing it. You can see some upgrades from Hunted, like Loyalty Beyond the Grade and Oath of Loyalty, making their way into a pretty standard, typical Dromai shell. You see Shelter coming in, Weakest Link. Essence of Ancestry Body Red is really cool tech that can certainly help you in some matchups. And yeah, it's just a standard Dromai list. You're trying to play your dragons, get maximum value from them. You have some really complicated endgames. You see Dominia in there. It's very interesting. We'll be breaking down this list later on the channel. Then we have Thomas Bailey Galbraith's list on Dio. This deck's basically, if you want to know how this deck works, go watch Sam Sutherland's game against Matt Rogers round 12. No, round 15 of Worlds at Osaka last year. Basically, this deck is trying to exploit System Reset plus the card Cerebellum Processor to generate extra action points and draw through most, if not the entire deck, and play multiple insane attacks in combination with the card High Octane, recently banned in CC. In LL, you get access to High Octane again, and you also get access to Tomb of Fiendal, which is an extremely powerful card for obvious reasons. So, do I think all these decks are powerful and good in this metagame? Yes. I think all these decks that are in this top 8 are extremely well positioned. They all have interesting and different matchup spreads, and I think you can really fit it to whatever you want to play. You want to play more board control-y? Dramai's right there. You want to play this crazy, just straight up aggressive combo deck, where you know eventually you're just going to be able to go off if you can assemble the right pieces. I mean, Dash IO is right there for you, as well as the wizards like Kano. You want to play just the mid-range deck that kind of like dominates the game by generating insane value and card draws. Play Briar and have a great matchup spread into multiple things, but also still have the power through Channel Heroic. You want to just go absolutely insanely wide, like go off your playmat with too many cards. Zen's right there. You want to disrupt your opponent. You want to like feel like the control mage that kind of stopping your opponent from playing the game while you advance your own game plan. Iceland is right there. You want to just watch the light leave your opponent's eyes as they play. Play new. This deck's great. Like you get access to some of the best disruptive tools ever printed, and you have one of the most interesting fatigue game plans and end games in the world. Um, you want to be in the you want to play more mid range. You like mid range? We got mid range. We got Ira right here for you. Just generating crazy amounts of value off of tools like upsticks and dual threat and the needles. Um, yeah, I think the format's in a really good place. I think the other two decks to talk about, Chain is currently in a very bad place. I would be unsurprised if it doesn't get revisited at some point, potentially by LSS maybe loosening that ban list slightly so that we get that deck to be playable. But I think also if you want to work on that deck and you want to see, prove me wrong, show us that there is something powerful to be done there, go ahead, do it. I think it's totally a way you could go. I think there's a lot of potential still left in that deck. On top of that, I think there's also Stavo. I believe there was one in ninth place at the event. Still definitely kicking around. Still definitely a solid mid-range deck. I think it would be foolish for us to all count him out. He's definitely still a real deck, and I think you should definitely have a game plan for him because people love Stavo. People will bring him to the event. So yeah, I think that's kind of exactly what we want to see. And if we look at the results, I think, we see that the good aggro players that are playing resilient decks that understand their matchup spreads are rising to the top, and I think that's, if I had to rank the decks in this format right now, I'd say pretty much all of this top 8 I would put pretty even, but I would put Briar and maybe Ira a little bit ahead of the curve because I think that mid-range pile power that they're kind of generating is incredibly strong. So, now that we've broken down the LL format, you kind of understand the archetypes that are going in and kind of how they interact. Let's look about. Let's say we want to play a ProQuest next weekend, and we've talked about how Briar is probably the best deck. Here is my take on Briar. I'm going to explain a lot of the card choices and the reasoning behind that. And yeah, so, why play Briar? We touched on this lightly. Access to block 4s from the hero ability. Let's look at it gently. So we've got Channel Mount Heroic, we have Everbloom Life, Force of Nature, Regrowth Shock, and Pulse of Counterhold. That's a huge amount of just block 4s that you can generate in your deck. You stop a lot of really powerful lines like Codex Leave No Witnesses very easily. You get access to some of the best Go Again generation in the format off of Briar's hero ability. Yeah, generating embodiments of lightning is incredibly strong. Who knew it? I will say that both the lightning rune blades that have made embodiments have rotated very quickly, and I don't think that's a mistake. You get access to maybe the best defensive option in the game in the head slot, Face of Purgatory. You have the deck to support it very easily as well. You can do some pretty insane plays with this. Block 1, 2 cards, redraw 1, make your opponent discard a card, block like 10 with Embodiment of Earth, plus like a block 3 attack, like draw a card, and then just send back like 3 card 15 or something like that. Just an insane tempo play. You have Tunic plus Rosetta Form, best weapon in the game plus best chess piece in the game. Grasp of the Arknight, just an insane blocking card that also gives you a good pitch outlet for your blues. Snapdragon Scalers, although I am sideboarding Spellbound Creepers for matchups where you're allowed to play a bit slower and you're allowed to get multiple counters out of this. The most counters I've ever gotten out of this in one game was 5. That sounds wrong. Might have been 4. Yeah, I think I got my 4th counter onto the Spellbound Creepers. And that's just an insane amount of generation to get out of it. Particularly against decks that don't Arcane Barrier well, like Dromai, for example. Vexing Quillhand, great AB option. Shock Charmers, the best like anti-wizard tool in the game, in my opinion. Probably just like Spell Void 2 just floating there, sitting on your arm slot in matchups where Grasp of the Arknight doesn't really have text anyway. Incredibly strong. Dyadic Carapace, AB2 on a chess piece. You get access to Vexing Quillhand in matchups where you just want AB1. This can do some really screwed up things in Rublade Mirrors where you don't necessarily want Shock Charmers or anything like that, but you still want access to AB1. Dustblade, one of the best anti-fatigue tools in the game. I think this is really strong against the decks that don't disrupt you quite as much like Oldhim. And I think it's incredibly strong at kind of shutting down that strategy in particular, where people are just going to try and block you out. Um, Seeds of Tomorrow, it's another great just anti-wizard card. Prevent 5, pretty good, pretty hard for a lot of wizard decks to beat that. Singapore, this is for matchups like kind of aggressive ones. Exude, great anti-fatigue tool against decks that are trying to use lots of instance and defense reactions to stop you. Notably, if you play a front pump like Bramble Spark, for example, you can make this big enough that a lot of the time they can't play D-Reacts and instance and stuff, and you never have to actually activate the ability even if they have a 4 or a 6. Um, CNC, just great mid-range tool for mid-range matchups. Particularly, I think the big thing with Briar is you get access to giving these two cards Go Again, which is one of the most powerful things you can kind of be doing because it puts your opponent into some really awkward forks. Bramble Spark, 0 for 4. Some of it's arcane. You pretty much always have the Earth card. If you don't, arsenal it, move on. Play this plus something else, generate an embodiment. Amazing. Chanamite Heroic, one of the big reasons to play this deck. There's nothing I really need to say about this. It dictates your blue base, but that's the only downside really. Blocks 4 when you need it to with Briar's ability. Somersault, one of the very few restricted cards in this format. Extremely strong, very, very powerful. Can block up to 6. It's just like an insane card, and it converts on offense as well. E-Strike, still one of the best cards in the game. Still amazing when you give it an embodiment of lightning, and can give it Go Again. Entwine Lightning, 0 for 4 Go Again. Exactly where you want to be. You know how good those are if you play Aurora. Lightning Surge, 0 for 4 Go Again. It's a lightning card for Entwine Lightning. That's where you want to be. You got your NIMBY package we already talked about. Plunder Run we already talked about. Rabble, unconditional Go Again with Channelmount Heroic, extremely strong. Scar for a Scar, 0 for 4 Go Again. A lot of the time against powerful aggro decks you might be on the back foot slightly. This card really shines in those matchups, but also just in the mid-range games where you want to trade value and life. Skizzik works to enable Skyward Serenade. Also, you can just make embodiments of lightning off of your hero ability. Who knew? It's a block 3, it's lightning, it's exactly where you want to be. Snatch, this card is just insane in this deck. You know, you combine it with things like Channelmount Heroic, Bramble Spark. You get this up to some big numbers that make it like your opponent's giving you their whole hand, or they're just conceding. This is particularly good when you combo it with effects like Plunder Run, or Force of Nature, and then you just make it your opponent just be like, oh, I just cannot let this hit, and then you hit them with something else. Maybe it's a CNC out the board, and just make their life very, very difficult. Swimming Gloomveil we already talked about. Pulse of Candlehold. It's an Earth Lightning card that blocks 4 a lot of the time, and in fatigue matchups sometimes you get more value out of it by putting Channelmount Heroics or something else on top. Amulet of Spring, it looks innocuous, but it's a 0 for 1 Go Again that sometimes generates another embodiment of Earth. That can mean you can block some really silly hands. Say you have an embodiment of Earth already, you block with an Amulet Spring plus a Everbloom Life. Let's say we have these two in hand. We put them both down, we're blocking 7. That then goes to 9 because we have an Amulet, an Anthem of Spring. We're now blocking 9, we're stopping the Spinal Crush effect, that's getting pummeled or something like that. Very, very strong. Autumn's Touch, it's a block 3 Earth card, you need your Earth cards to turn on CMH, very strong. Everbloom Life, block 4 Earth card, and it's a non-attack action you can play out. Really that simple. In long fatigue games, you can get a lot of ways where you start cycling these. You can play like 2 or 3 out in a turn to start recurring costed things, or you can just go recur themselves multiple times, generate embodiments, put E-Strikes on the bottom, and then just start getting back value that way. Force of Nature, I think this is one of the best cards. It's one of the most threatening cards ever when it lines up. In a lot of matchups, you want to like get a Channelmount Heroic down, then play a Force of Nature, fuse it, particularly into decks that don't block well or they're already out of armor, and then set up some really, really big turns where you go, where you start playing multiple attacks, giving them Go Again, they all get plus from CMH, you're drawing multiple cards, you just keep going, you can generate some really insane like 45 damage turns that way. And Regrowth Shock we've already talked about. So I think this deck's extremely strong going into the current metagame. I would recommend playing some games with it. I think it's also just a really good way to enjoy Fab and go into this format with a powerful deck that's not too complicated to play. You can get some really fun sequencing out of things like creepers, as well as um, embodiments of lightning and how you stack those. You get access to maybe the new Vest tool in LL. Might be a crazy take. I think if you wanted to change this deck for your local metagame, I think the other part about Briar that's really good is it's very adaptable. You can go deep into being more powerful on the aggro resilient scale. Um, you can. This is obviously more of a resilient list, but if you want to go much more powerful, you could do things like Crown of Dominion Cash In. You could do things like playing Golganian Tomb as a free non-attack. Um, you could kind of just try and lean more into the combo aggressive side. You can go even as deep as like Promise of Plenty, etc. Kind of lean into that old style of Briar, maybe lean into Belittle. Belittle Nimby, probably there's a deck in there. I'm very curious about what that ends up looking like, but yeah, I think there's a lot of tools there for you to kind of change this deck around and make it as powerful as you want. Um, yeah, I think this deck's extremely well positioned right now. I think you have great game into the aggressive decks, you have a lot of great game into the combo decks, and you have amazing game into the mid-range aggro matchups that are trying to disrupt you and beat you. And against the aggro decks, you just draw your Channel Mount Heroic, you put it down, and then you win the game. So yeah, I hope this video has kind of served as an okay guide to LL and kind of what the metagame's looking like right now, and what I think you should play at your local ProQuest. Um, Please hit subscribe. It helps us out a lot. Give us a like if you enjoyed our content. If you have any notes or feedback for us, feel free to drop them in. Pretty much, we're always happy to talk content or just talk about deck lists if possible. I think the interesting thing with this deck in particular is that there's so many different directions to take it, and I think there's so much you could do with Briar in this upcoming ProQuest season. Alright, thanks everybody. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe again. And we'll catch you soon with multiple new LL videos.